So this week's episode of To the Abandoned Sacred Beast focuses once again on Hank and showing what he's been up to since basically being thrown away and kind of going on a rampage. And I felt like this episode was probably the most emotional for Hank in particular. Last week was just incredibly gripping with just the siren and everything that it kind of went for. I thought it was probably the best incarnate focus episode that we've had. And coming into this week and just seeing the overall trauma and torment that Hank is dealing with, I thought was exceptionally well done, especially with the visual directing. We have basically scenes that are designed to make it feel like Hank is chained down. He's being controlled and manipulated in the guilt of all those that he's killed, all those that he has to kill, and his love who is holding the chains on him. I thought it was just stylized incredibly well. It captured a very complex atmosphere that Hank's dealing with. He's fighting the urge to not fully give in and turn into his incarnate form and not be able to transform back. He's already seen and basically has dealt with what he's already done when he went on his original rampage, and he knows what happens to his fellow soldiers once they can't transform back. So he's fighting the urge to not transform, even when he's going up against an incarnate who basically is wiping the floor with him and is just hoping that he would transform and basically use his powers, be the person who he was on the battlefield. And it was so interesting seeing both how within his own delirious state, how he had all this guilt and was just basically, it felt like he wanted to give up. He wanted to give in, but because he is basically caged in and chained down, he has to fulfill his duty before he can fully die and pass on. And then in his awakened state, you just have a man who is so beaten and bruised and just really on the verge of death, but has to keep fighting. He's using his tools, his artillery. He's not giving in and transforming, and when he does, he almost immediately transforms back. I felt like, based on what we've seen with Hank throughout this story, seeing what's happening inside his mind and seeing what's happening just on the outside, it was so gripping to just see the worst Hank we've seen. Someone who really wants to just do the best thing he can for this world. Take the lives of his soldiers in the most peaceful way. Fulfill the duty and just the overall pact that they all agreed to, but he can't. He really can't do this alone, and the fact that Nancy is no longer there with him, he doesn't really have a shoulder who he can lean on. He doesn't have someone who can basically tell him when it's okay to rest, when it's okay to not push yourself. He's really going at it alone, and for a while he was doing well by himself, but at this point in time, he needs to recover. But if he just sleeps, someone's going to kill him in his sleep. He doesn't have that person to protect him, and I think that's what's so gripping about the battle, is it was so one-sided. You just have a beast that is very similar to even Hank's incarnate form, and he is just so bound and determined to get Hank to join Kane's side, basically fight with them, show them the beast that he used to fight with on the battlefield, and every time he denies him, he gets closer and closer to ripping his heart out, but he hopes he'll transform, and when he does transform, it's just a disappointment because he immediately transforms back. That's what I love about the story being told here, is that because we've had so much time seeing how Hank's mentality works and just the relationships he's formed and just the amount of guilt he has, seeing the guilt really eat away at him and pretty much kill his internal mind, and then just seeing how he's acting in the face of death itself, it is so gripping because Hank can easily die at every second of this episode. And when he falls to seemingly his death, of course, he's not going to die there. He'll probably transform or he'll recover in some way, shape, or form, hold on to something. But at the end of the episode, it does look like he falls to his death. It felt like that was the episode overall. At every single punch that he took, it felt like he was getting closer and closer to death, but he didn't want to give in, which is what makes the entire story of this episode so tragic. Is you have the military hunting Hank and then realizes that there's two incarnates that they need to kill, and if only they could see what Hank's been holding on to all this time, not transforming and getting his ass just handed to him, it would change a lot of people's perspectives. That was a big part of what Liza was saying in this episode towards Claude, who Claude doesn't understand how this girl could want to side with monsters. Why would she want to? And Liza says she also wanted to kill Hank at one point, but she eventually took a step back and listened to what he had to say and actually started to see things from a different perspective. That's what Claude needs to do. That's what the military in general needs to do. And of course, getting the masses to agree to that, that's probably not going to happen. But someone like Claude, it is a possibility. Even though he does have his own vengeance and revenge that he's seeking, there is a chance that this young and almost naive mind, but someone who does have the ability to see things through a different lens, a different perspective, could maybe say, I order you to not kill Hank. It is a possibility. Because at this point, yes, he did kind of cause a rampage, but he is still fighting in his human form, and that's what's so interesting. Is this tale, it's doing so much here. It does have that, if we look at the past episode, it's had that Monster of the Week formula, but there's such a grand military story being told here versus Hank versus Kane versus even Claude's side. There's so much actually being explored right now, and it's so interesting to see the many dilemmas and moral conflicts that these characters have. You can look at the character Roy, who's just wanting to take Hank and put him on his side and fight alongside him like he once did. That's because he's in his incarnate form and can't really think rationally, and that someone like Kane isn't in the right. But you can understand just the pain and torment of not having your captain as he once was, because you're being basically brainwashed by your natural animal urges. You have someone like Claude who's so bound and determined to kill this man, kill Incarnate, to make sure his brother, Kane, and just the rest, they can't get what they want and destroy this world, but he can't see things through a different lens, that not everyone on the side that he's fighting against has to be evil. It's the whole thing with wars in general. When you get into this war mentality, the other side's evil, the other side's wrong, but that's not always the case. Sometimes people are just fighting to survive, and you don't have to kill everyone on the opposing side. And then you got people such as Liza or even Nancy, and just the pain that they're struggling with, that they're fighting for a cause they believe in, but there's ways to do it that isn't so brutal and just violent. That's what I love about this story. There's so much being told here, and it's absolutely fantastic. Basically, we're seeing Hank just at his most vulnerable and weakest, not only just with his body ready to give up, but just his mentality shattering. You have characters who are so worried that they're gonna have to take the life of someone they hold dear, and then you have other people who are just, they're military. They're going to kill whoever is a giant beast and isn't clearly human. That's what's so fun about this show, is that when the characters and their actors really get into the roles, and there's been a few key episodes where I feel like characters such as Nancy or Hank have really captured such an emotional range for their characters. Hank in this episode in particular was a standout. It really did feel like someone who was mentally about to break, someone who was losing his mind and felt like he needed to rest, he needed a shoulder to lean on, but also the rage and just the pain that was going through every single punch that he took, or just how many times he was fighting back not to transform. You really felt like the actor got into the role exceptionally well. There's been other episodes where Nancy has also captured that complex atmosphere. There's key sections throughout this story. It's not always there, but there's key moments and key just phrases or lines that they'll speak, and you just feel like this, it kind of sends a chill up your spine. You feel like, wow, that's not just like Monster of the Week anime character we're looking at. That actually felt like a person, part of this world, and it felt like we really believed what it is they're saying. You have lines from Claude in his rage, and you're like, I believe him. I really believe that he truly thinks this is what has to happen, even if we personally disagree, because we've been following Hank all this time. But he hasn't been following Hank all this time. He doesn't understand that people like him don't have to be put down at this point in time. In the future, sure, but right now they don't have to. That's what I love about this show. It's such a sleeper hit in a lot of ways. It does so much right that a lot of anime fans would truly appreciate it if they give it a shot, but from the outside you may look at it and say, yeah, it's probably nothing that special, but honestly, it is. It's one of the things I'm most excited to watch every single week, because whether we're getting a Monster of the Week style episode or something that's a more kind of plot driven and end goal driven, where you see just all the sides kind of connecting and just where each side wants to go, it's so interesting overall. It never tries to blow you away with like flashy animation trying to make you think that this is a important series to follow because look at the gorgeous art or look at the gorgeous and fluid animation. It has solid art and it has solid animation at times, but the things that always grip me is just the overall character writing and how these stories connect and just how emotionally gripping they are. And that's the most important thing. As long as you can kind of hit the main points you need to for production and you focus all your time and energy into bringing out just amazing writing, you're gonna have me hooked and no questions asked. This episode was just incredibly memorable. If you really take a look at last week and combine it with this week, it's such a great story, even though they're so different. We had a kind of Monster of the Week style story last week, and this week is more plot driven in terms of the end goal. But when you really take the perspective of what Nancy was saying and how Claude was going against it, and then you see what's going on with Hank in this episode and him fighting his demons, trying to hold on to his humanity as he's basically trying to be dragged to the person he hates the most and fight for him, it just feels like this is telling such an interesting story that is incredibly memorable. And even when this first season wraps up, we're gonna remember this show, at least for the people who have been following this week by week. It's just a great series at the end of the day, and honestly, I think more positives than negatives week after week. I'm quite excited to see where the final few episodes of this season are going to go, how MAPPA will just end this first season, whether they'll do cliffhanger, confirm a second season, do something more anime original. There's quite a few ways they could go about this, but no matter how this ends, this is going to be a series that I remember very fondly from this season of anime. A season with so many strong shows and just ideas being explored, but this one, it really does stand out among all the heavy hitters that people are going to write home about, myself included. The series that I talk about week after week saying, look at the quality, but this, even though people may look over this when maybe picking, because there's plenty of people who don't follow weekly anime, they wait till season's over to see what they should watch, but this is going to be one that if I'm asked, I'm going to be like, you know what, I know everyone's going to be hyping up the big series of the season, but maybe check this one out as well, because it's pretty freaking fantastic. But what did everyone think of this week's episode of To the Abandoned Sacred Beast? Did you love it? Did you hate? Your favorite moment? Where do you think next week is going to go? Let me know whatever you're feeling down in that comment section below. If you did enjoy this video though, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.